Hi, this is Lindsay Yurda from the South Carolina Department of Education's Personalized Learning Team. Welcome to a quick tour of how the South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0 Element Assessment connects to the Measuring PCBL Toolkit. The purpose of this video is to provide a short introduction of how the Measuring PCBL Toolkit outcomes can help measure growth in assessment. If you haven't yet watched the welcome video in the header of the crosswalk document that explains our overall purpose, we do suggest watching that video before you continue on with this one. The Measuring PCBL Toolkit focuses on 8 outcomes that we believe are distinctive of a high-quality PCBL system. Mastery orientation is the PCBL outcome that we'll focus on today. The toolkit was created to help make measuring PCBL impacts as accessible as possible for classroom teachers, school coaches and leaders, and anyone wanting to document the effects of PCBL practices for learners. Let's dig in and learn more about the connections between assessment and the Measuring PCBL Toolkit outcomes. If you're wanting to measure your impact in assessment, you could use one of the following Measuring PCBL Toolkit outcomes: self-efficacy, mastery orientation, or agency. We know that in order for assessment to be most meaningful, students need to be at the heart of the assessment process. They need to be using goals and growth as a way to fuel their learning. With a mastery orientation approach to the assessment process, students are aware of what their learning goals are. They seek feedback and they view mistakes as an opportunity to learn. They monitor their progress and they can make adjustments as necessary. This is assessment for and as learning. Now, let's look to see how you could use mastery orientation to measure impact in the SCTS 4.0 element of assessment. But first, let's really think through why a mastery orientation approach to assessment is important. First, we know that students with the high mastery orientation focus on learning, not grades. They focus on competency and collaboration, not competition. They focus on understanding and growth, not just looking smart or proving how smart they are. Research tells us that when students adopt mastery-oriented goals, they engage in more effective learning strategies, such as learning from their mistakes, changing strategies that don't work, and seeking help when necessary. They are also more intrinsically motivated, which is the gold standard of motivation. We want to navigate away from performance goals, which lead to a focus on the outcome rather than the process of learning, such as achieving success by any means, avoiding the appearance of incompetence, and being more susceptible to extrinsic sources of motivation. The indicators for the SCTS 4.0 rubric element assessment and the PCBL outcome mastery orientation can work together to support teachers in collecting valuable data about their students' understanding around assessment. For example, on the 4.0 rubric, teachers are expected to include information in their assessment plan that makes it clear they will measure performance in multiple ways. And the Mastery Orientation Data Collection tool has survey questions that ask learners about their learning, their growth, and their progression toward goals. Do they value growth over grades? Using the survey questions to find out how students are feeling about assessment, using a mastery orientation lens, can uncover if students do value growth over grades, if they're comfortable with risk-taking and making mistakes, and whether learning is performative or personal. This data can then, in turn, be used by teachers to inform and grow their instructional practices. Let's click into the crosswalk to see how we might use the data collection tools in the Measuring PCBL Toolkit. Let's scroll down to assessment. Let's imagine I am a high school Spanish teacher who has chosen to set a goal to work on the SCTS 4.0 rubric element. of assessment because I want to know why, when they perform similarly in class, some of my students are doing poorly on quizzes and tests, and some are doing really well. Are there other factors at play? Am I putting too much emphasis on grades and not enough on growth? I know that I have 3 different outcomes that I can use to measure impact. And I know that there's a strong connection between mastery orientation and assessment. So I'm going to click on the mastery orientation button, and here we are. I see that there are several prompts and questions that I can use to create a survey for my students. Now over here, I notice that each prompt has a code for which level it best fits. And since I'm a high school teacher, I want to make sure the prompts I select fit where my students are as learners. So I might pick 4 prompts that I can use with a Likert scale, like, what am I learning? What I am learning and how I improve is more important than the grades that I get. It is clear who the smart kids are because they get the best grades. Making mistakes is part of learning. And sometimes I hold back from doing my best in class because of what others say about me. And then, since I'm really interested in whether my students are valuing growth over grades, I might also pick some open-ended questions like, pretend you're older and you're giving a little kid advice about school. What might you say to them about why learning at school is important? And if I want to get some more here, I could even add, what might you say to them about grades? What might you say about getting better at? And you could add whatever skill that we needed to add there. If your best friend was upset and told you that they had made a lot of improvements in one area of school, that they had been struggling with, let's say, fractions or writing an essay, but they were still disappointed about their grade on the fractions test or the essay, what might you say to them? Once I made the survey, I would give it to one or all of my classes, depending on what I was trying to measure. And after getting the survey results back, I could analyze the data by myself, with my coach, or with another colleague to see what I notice and wonder about what my students are saying about their beliefs around assessment. If I needed to follow up and do some small group interviews, I could. And that's really where those open-ended questions would come in handy. Then I could use the data to make some changes to my instruction based on what my students said. If my SLO was focused on this same 4.0 element, I could even use these prompts as pre and post data related to one of the competencies I might be working to integrate in my class. If you're wondering if you can do this with more than one outcome at a time, the answer is you can. You can use each of these tabs as a menu to pull from as it relates to the SCTS 4.0 element that you're trying to measure. Now, what if I'm a school leader or an instructional coach? How can I use this same crosswalk? Well, if your school has identified a few of the SCTS 4.0 elements that are your focus for the year, then you could ask everyone to focus on the same one, or you could give them a choice between a few. And then as the coach or school leader, you could create a school-wide survey using the prompts and questions from the data collection tool that apply to the SCTS 4.0 elements that are your focus. Have each teacher give the survey to one class during a given class period, and then reflect on that whole school data or individual class data when you're all meeting in your PLCs. Teachers could set their own growth goals around the data from their students. This is one way that you can leverage the connection between the SCTS 4.0 rubric element assessment and the data collection tools and the Measuring PCBL Toolkit. Now it's your turn to think about which Measuring PCBL Toolkit outcome you want to focus on and explore the survey prompts and questions. We love to partner with educators. Please remember you can always reach out to your regional coach by going to personalizesc.ed.sc.gov/contact us.